On this episode of Technicolor Blood, Netflix finally passes on something, possibly for the first time ever.
And it's the holidays, so there's nothing else.
Technicolor Blood starts right now if that wasn't a good enough intro for you. Technicolor Blood, we are back once again. My name's Chris, as always. I'm joined by Terrence, Holiday Terrence.
I'm in a festive mood.
I don't believe you.
It's just hard to do a show about Hollywood news during this particular time of year because the Hollywood infrastructure is all shut down and I don't know, there's not a lot going on.
And yet here we are.
Yeah.
Your devoted podcast providers. So what do you do when there's a light news week? You talk about box office numbers. All right, so I just want to start off this by, since we are coming to the end of the year here, final episode of the year, the global box office is actually up 2.7% from last year, up to $41.7 billion. And I thought it was kind of interesting to see some of the differences between the domestic take and the worldwide take. Specifically, the top two, which we've sort of discussed before, are flip-flopped. And domestically, the number one film of the year in the U.S. was Black Panther by not exactly a wide margin. They just sort of edged Infinity War out, but globally it's the other way around, and it's not even close. Globally, Infinity War is up almost $1 billion on Black Panther, but in the U.S., Black Panther ended up being the highest grossing movie of the year. And I guess during the year we had sort of talked about how Disney was so dominant this year, and now that the final numbers are kind of coming in the top five, the top three of the year, Black Panther, Infinity War, and Incredibles 2. And then you have Jurassic World, and then the Fox/Marvel property, Deadpool 2 was number 5. It's kind of surprised that Deadpool 2 domestically ended up in the top 5 of the year.
Yeah, I'm blown away by that.
It looks like you're just hearing this right now for the first time.
Yeah, I want to say that didn't we report earlier on that Venom had surpassed Deadpool 2?
Domestically? I'm talking about domestically right now.
Yeah.
Domestically, Venom is number 10.
Okay.
But if you, again, go back to the international list, Venom is number 5 internationally at just under $1 billion, $855 million. And it's, a good $100 million plus ahead of Deadpool 2.
Yeah, I can't keep track of the multiple lists that,
it's 2 lists.
Yeah.
It's 2.
Well, okay.
I mean, it's a lot.
Still,
2 is a big number.
It's more than one. Isn't that the definition of multiple?
I mean, that is a lot of numbers.
Welcome to the end of the year. Just, here we go.
Definitely finish this episode. Don't stop listening now. So, yeah, there's some box office news for you. I don't know. Maybe. So I just thought it was interesting that Black Panther ended up holding its top spot all year long in America. That was obviously a huge hit for them, and I'm sure a huge surprise for them.
Yeah.
And
so are we just in a transition point? Will domestic box office numbers cease to be relevant? Will it all totally boil down to the international list?
It sure looks like it.
I mean, movies are literally, they're rewriting them to appeal to mainly the Chinese market, but to international markets in a broader sense as well. I mean, China, it's huge. I mean, it's just growing. It's growing faster than the American movie market can ever hope to grow again. So it's the frontier for Hollywood making their money.
Yeah, and as I understand it, in China the cost of a movie ticket, per capita, per dollar, per yen or whatever, is not the same as it is here. It's cheaper there.
Sure.
So when are they going to figure that out?
Yeah. Oh yeah. No kidding.
Yeah. So and then also, I guess, sort of on that subject, I don't actually remember the first time we started noticing this, or I can't say this is the first time it ever happened, but the first time I think I consciously noticed them like taking a big set piece and putting it in China with famous Chinese actors that American audiences had no idea who they were was The Dark Knight. When they had that whole sequence, I think, in Hong Kong.
Right.
And I know that's not the first time it happened, but it's kind of the first time while I was watching a movie, I thought to myself, they're doing this for this right now.
Sure. Yeah. I remember also what what was the James Bond movie that there's a significant action sequence. It's a Daniel Craig one that's set in Hong Kong, but I remember they specifically wrote that into it because they wanted it to be the highest grossing James Bond ever, and they were successful with that.
Interesting.
So yeah.
Okay. Well, and another sort of related topic as far as domestic box office versus international, Aquaman had the smallest DC Universe opening ever in the States, and yet it's poised to cross $1 billion worldwide. So again, I mean, the opinion of the American audience is slowly becoming sort of not irrelevant, but certainly secondary.
The big surprise to me there is that the numbers for the Aquaman opening here in the U.S. were large enough that I'm surprised to know that it was the least successful DCU movie that's been released so far.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I guess all of those movies, despite how unpopular they are and how their total box office take is never very impressive, I guess their opening weekends are always very strong.
Mm-hmm. Sure. You even though they never kind of look very good, you can always expect that sort of pop at the beginning,
and then they just peter out a lot faster than say the Marvel movies.
But it's interesting because even though it was the smallest DC universe, cinematic universe opening in the States, it still seemed to me that the opening weekend take did better, I think, than most people expected in the U.S.
Right.
I still thought, that looked so bad to me, so I didn't expect it to be a massive opening, but it actually did bigger than I thought it would.
Right.
So it's kind of strange how I guess the bar has been set so high by Marvel, and then maybe we're sort of guilty in our own minds of setting it so low for DC that this opening, even though it was so small, sort of surprised, I think, both of us for the size of it.
Right. So speaking of surprises, did the Jumanji movie make it onto either of those lists?
Oh, I'm sure it did. Let's see how far down the line, though. So domestically, let's see. Was that not 2018?
I thought it was.
I thought it was too, but it must not have been.
Also, didn't Crazy Rich Asians end up... it outperformed several of the really large blockbuster films that it was released on the same weekend with. So I'm...
Yeah, it did. It finished 14th domestically.
Which one?
For the whole year, Crazy Rich Asians.
Okay.
And let's see.
Those are impressive numbers for an all-Asian cast and a film that, is just relationships.
Actually, 34th in the worldwide gross, which kind of surprised me. I thought it would be
bigger in Asia,
much higher. Yeah. But clearly wrong about that. So it's funny because it was a year where I feel like I had a lot of fun at the movies this year. If you I'm not talking about quality or like this is my best of the year or this or that yet. We'll get to that down the line sometime, I'm sure. But I feel like I had a lot of enjoyment and fun at the movies this year. But again, like I feel like we say every year, the Oscar nominations haven't come out yet, but I feel like, there's not really that one great, fantastic, memorable movie that is going to go down as, one of the best of, the last 10 years or whatever.
Yeah, I can't really think of anything that stands out that way. But that being said, there really aren't those kind of tentpole directors working anymore who, you can count on to always deliver like the best film that year.
Right, yeah.
Most of them have retired out or they're just not making that quality of film, and the next generation of them, there's no incentive to push them to make something new or fresh. All the money is in just recycling the same films over and over again.
Yeah, I hope it's just a situation of it being a down year, but I'm sure that's just more of a trend of reality right now.
Yeah, like I don't feel like anything that happened in 2018 is going to change anytime soon. Like I think it's pretty clear that we're seeing the formula that's working, and it's going to be the same formula through the early 2020s.
But just to be clear, I did feel like I had more fun at the movies this year for some reason.
Oh, did you?
There were a couple of movies that just really got my blood going when I was at them. So that's a positive. I mean, at the end of the day, I guess that's the real point to all this, right?
Absolutely.
All right. So here's another. I thought this was kind of an interesting one. Netflix very famously has never turned down a project in the history of filmed entertainment.
That is true.
So apparently, I'm blanking on the studio. Sony wanted to offload the Watson and Holmes movie starring Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly. Apparently, it tested so poorly that Sony attempted to offload it onto Netflix, and Netflix, who has acquired a lot of bad properties in this specific way, where a studio wants to sort of dump them, passed on that, which gives me even less confidence about seeing this movie.
Yeah, I've seen many, many reports of people just getting up and walking out of that movie.
I've seen the walkout reports too, and man, I guess obviously we haven't seen it to this point yet, but I wonder how much of this is just it was doomed from the start, or if it's one of those things where, well, a better director, like they'd been matched up with Adam McKay a couple of times, talented director who's done a lot of things. This was done by Ethan Coen. And I think he did maybe he did that Walk Hard thing, the other John C. Reilly,
right?
The Dewey Cox story, and a couple other movies that you're just like, So once again, maybe this is another example of a good director could have pulled something out of that script, but not having seen it, I can't really comment quite yet.
Who can say for sure? I mean, it might just be a situation too where both those actors are much older now than they were when they did those other films, so maybe that kind of chemistry doesn't quite translate the way it did.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I'm trying to give them some sort of an out here, but it could just be that pairing just doesn't work right now.
Yeah, I feel bad for Will Ferrell. He's been on a serious decline the last several years. I can't remember the last time he released a movie that was even remotely popular. It's been a while.
It's been a long while, and he's had a lot of before it was direct to Netflix, he had a lot of direct to video stuff. Yeah. And it just... Yeah, he was a lot of fun for a short amount of time.
It makes me worried because I feel like we're entering that territory where out of desperation, he's going to start making unnecessary sequels to his successful films.
Oh, boy.
Like, we're going to start hearing about Elf 2 before too long.
No.
Yeah.
Let's hope he doesn't have tax debt, too, because he's just become a staple on Netflix.
Yeah.
All right, so this one actually kind of caught my interest here towards the end of the holiday season. Home Alone. Terrence, if you remember that movie well at all, there's a famous scene in there where the kid orders pizza and then has the pizza guy, I guess, leave it on the doorstep, but he puts an old movie on, and the sound from the movie is it's like an old gangster movie, an old black and white, and there's a bunch of dialogue in it and a bunch of automatic machine gun fire, blah, blah, blah. So I was a kid, I guess I wasn't a kid, like a little kid, but I was too young at the time to care or notice that apparently that movie that was playing in the background was not a real movie at all. And that surprises me because at the time it certainly seemed like it was well done and it looked exactly like that kind of movie from the time. So Twitter sort of had a mild freak out about that last week, and I kind of want to go back just to watch that one scene to see if now with my more critical eye than it was when I'd seen that movie originally, if I would have immediately thought, oh, okay, this is definitely not real.
I'm sure you would. I have zero doubt in my mind.
Yeah, that's why I was kind of so surprised at the time. And obviously, I assume that the guy in the little fake movie was an actor of the time that clearly at that point I didn't recognize. Yeah. So that just kind of blew me away, because that's definitely the kind of thing that I don't think would get past me currently. Right. But then, as I don't know when it came out in 1990, so I was a kid still. So
I love that it's taken this long for social media to figure out that hey, this is a topic that we can blow up about.
Yeah, and every year, social media's been around for a while now, and this is obviously a beloved Christmas movie, and it just was under the radar until this year. Yeah. Time was up for that, and what's the song that had so much controversy this year? The world is finally caught up to these Christmas related things. The Baby It's Cold Outside song. Right. Not really, it's not controversial. The Home Alone thing's not controversial. It's just kind of funny that all of a sudden everyone decided,
Yeah. I'm intrigued now to just watch a YouTube supercut of all the clips from fake movies that have been made to air in the background of a real movie. Sure. Just to kind of see what all,
that's got to be its own little cottage industry in the film industry.
Yeah, maybe.
I wonder if there's a company that does trailers now. There's also a company that makes little fake movies that happen in the background of real movies.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, you speaking of Netflix a minute ago, you had some news for us to drop.
I did.
Yeah, you did.
Okay.
You don't have to talk about it. It's not really news. Well, none of this is really news.
There was a story that talked about how the Bird Box, the Sandra Bullock straight to Netflix version of The Happening was released over the Christmas holiday is already up to 45 million views on Netflix. I think worth noting only because this is only, I think, the second time, at least, that it's become publicly talked about in any sort of major way that Netflix has revealed the viewer numbers on any of their stuff. You know, when they kind of caught a little bit of heat for canceling all those Marvel shows, they went ahead and kind of released some numbers to show that that the viewership for those shows were, you know, pretty paltry. You know, and here they're kind of doing the opposite, saying like, you know, hey, this new movie that we got, it's like a huge, everybody should be watching it because 45 million of the families around you have already checked it out or whatever. So I think it's interesting that Netflix might see some value in letting people know how many people are actually watching their stuff. You know, maybe if they're not going to be releasing all this stuff into theaters, and so they can't compare it in terms of box office, they want to find another metric that they can put their movies up against movies that are in theatrical release.
Yeah, and for me though, I know, like you mentioned, their whole point of this is to get their brand out there, you know, continue to get their brand out there, continue to try to compete with box office numbers, even though, like you said, they don't have a box office comparison. But when I read this, my thought was, I'm kind of shocked that I haven't seen Bird Box yet, but it feels like they're showing that the bar is so low for a big successful Netflix original movie that this is there's nothing really remarkable about this movie that I've heard leading up to it. Like, there was no buzz about it before it was released. I didn't remember reading news about it in development when it was agreed to. I just feel like if this is the biggest original Netflix movie, then it kind of goes back to what we were talking about in previous weeks. They need to acquire a studio and actually start doing some real original movies instead of stuff like this. Because to me, if I'm like Marvel and I read this, I'm laughing.
I mean, I don't know, 45 million views in 1 week. I mean, if those were ticket sales, that would be astronomical.
But for the type of movie this is, I just feel like, I mean, maybe it could work as almost a warning to those other studios that, look, this little thing that no one had even heard about a week ago suddenly has 45 million views.
Yeah, I mean, well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know that it's little. Like, I don't know that this would be any less valid if this was a theatrical release. I mean, it stars Sandra Bullock, and it's a movie that is clearly, I mean, I would say, you know, it would not have been made if A Quiet Place hadn't been so successful.
Probably.
It seems, you know, cribbed from that script. So, I mean, if this was a theatrical release, I think, first of all, you would not expect it to be a huge box office success, but here we are. It's got 45 million watches in just 1 week. That, I mean, again, without a better breakdown of what those numbers really mean, it's, you know, an apples to oranges comparison. But I mean, on the surface, that sounds like a whole lot of people chose to stay home and watch the Sandra Bullock movie, then chose to go to the movie theater and watch the latest movie from, you know, somebody else. And
it's interesting to me too that it is based on a book, but it just doesn't fit into any category that you would expect whatever metrics top movie is. So like in this one, it's Netflix's most watched original movie. I would not expect that to just be sort of this small drama based on a book, like this sort of sci-fi drama. That's just kind of surprising to me, which is a good thing. Like, I'm kind of glad that it's not some, you know, made up superhero thing, or, you know, some comic book character that they acquired and made their first, you know, big release feature on.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess in that way, it's a little bit encouraging that there's something that's more trending towards a little bit more original and not like all the other stuff that's in theaters right now.
Except, well, I don't know. It just doesn't seem particularly original. Like I said, I mean, it just feels like Happening or A Quiet Place.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it feels a lot like A Quiet Place.
But it's not a comic book, so that's good.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's true.
Clearly, the bar is low for me as well.
Yeah. Still based on a book, so not an original property.
Yeah. Not an original property.
I don't know that Hollywood is capable of making original properties anymore.
And it's just very harsh for you to compare it to The Happening, but you're not wrong. So.
Well, let's say politely, you know, and I haven't seen Bird Box, and would have no interest in seeing it other than this news story. So now I'm like, okay, is this something I need to pay attention to? But it feels like it just floats somewhere between The Happening and A Quiet Place. Like, it's not as bad as one, but it's not as good as the other.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll be somewhere right in the middle of that.
Yeah.
So you had some news on something that we're actually way more interested in than Bird Box.
Yeah, so I thought this was worth bringing up because in previous episodes we had mentioned that Peter Jackson, the director of the Hobbit films and Lord of the Rings, he's a huge World War I film or a buff, I guess, historical buff. And we've always wanted him to actually just make a World War I film. He still hasn't done that, but he did make a documentary about World War I. It's called They Shall Not Grow Old. And it's kind of interesting new take on documentary filmmaking is it takes a bunch of archival footage shot of World War I, all of it in black and white, and then colorizes it so well that in most shots for most audience members, it looks like it was shot in color originally. And it kind of brings a whole new vibrancy and life to this, incredibly old footage. Anyway, it's turning out to be pretty popular. It has not been released theatrically in a wide release yet, but in this kind of interesting experiment, the studio that created the film partnered up with Fathom Events, which you may know from your local theater, is where they'll take like Broadway performances or sporting events, and they'll do a one night only stream where they use a satellite feed to beam the signal into each of the theaters, and the theaters will project it up on the screen. So you can go watch a big screen version of, a heavyweight boxing match or whatever. And so they did that with this documentary. They've done it for 2 nights now, and it's ended up making over $5 million of just people who wanted to see it on the big screen going to see it. And that's, here we were talking earlier about, hundreds of millions of dollars. So $5 million might not sound like a lot, but for a documentary, 2 nights earning $5 million is kind of a big deal. So people are excited about it, and they, it's generating the buzz that they're hoping for when it gets its wide theatrical release January 11th. I believe the actual theatrical release will be in a traditional format. It won't be streamed in the theaters. They'll actually be films projected locally. But regardless, we were already intrigued by this, and I think this is just more information telling us that this is a documentary that's definitely going to be worth seeing, and probably worth seeing on the big screen for a change.
Yeah, if ever there was a documentary that I wanted to see on the big screen, it's this one.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, we'll come back and talk about some fun we had at the movies this year. All right, Terrence, you're into fun.
Heck yeah.
You're just a fun guy. I mean, I can see just there's fun all over you right now.
Well, this is fun.
Well, I just wanted to, since it's end of the year, let's bypass the best and this and that and critical discussion and all that. What was the most fun you had at a movie this year in the theater? Well,
this might be slightly biased because I saw it so recently, but the first thing that springs to mind without question is Into the Spider-Verse.
Okay.
The animated Spider-Man movie. That was a blast. I just genuinely had fun the entire time. That movie is made with so much joy. And, it's... the Marvel movies already seem kind of like the antithesis to the DC movies, but I mean, this one even more so. There's no brooding. They're not trying to tell some broader story about everything that's evil about humanity or whatever. It's just this kid who learns he has superpowers and starts doing all the stuff that a kid who learns he has superpowers would do. It's just a ton of fun in the theater. And again, if you haven't seen it, you need to see it. Even if you don't have kids, if you just like having a good time at the movie theater and experiencing something visually amazing to look at, this movie is all that.
Yeah, I'm still excited to see that one. It's definitely on my list. I will go with Bohemian Rhapsody. I just had so much fun. Specifically, the Live Aid recreation at the end was just so that movie in a lot of ways surpassed my expectations. And I know that we've talked about how it's sort of, critically been dinged here and there, and I get all that. But just the amount of enjoyment and fun I got out of seeing that in the theater, and literally sitting in my seat, the only complaint I had, I think I mentioned this on the show, was I didn't feel like the theater had the music up loud enough. And I just really wanted it to be blaring. And that recreation at the end of the Live Aid performance, of course, in my brain, I also knew that this is basically a shot-for-shot remake of it, because I remember certain things from that performance. And I was just so struck by the crowd in that scene. Looks like it's being sweetened, like their excitement is being sweetened, because it's just impossible to believe that a band could have an audience in their hands that well, and having them react to every note they play from front to back in a stadium that held 100,000 people. And it's absolutely 100% realistic as to what happened. And that just blows me away. Like, to me, that's just, if that's not in the top 2 of rock and roll moments in the history of rock and roll, then I don't. I mean, for me, I can't even think of anything better than that, honestly. So. Right. So that to me is just that was just such a they captured that so perfectly. That was the musical performances were really thrilling. Obviously, Rami Malek killed it in that role as Freddie Mercury, and that's what I'll remember most about that movie. I won't remember sort of the critiques I had of it, or I mean, not even as much as Rami Malek was great in it. Not even his performance is the first thing I'll think of. The first thing I'll think of is just how much fun it was to see that in the theater, and just being an old cynical bastard. I just very rarely walk out of a movie feeling like, oh my God, I just had a lot of fun.
Right.
So.
Yeah. I would also like to throw out an honorable mention in that there was a movie that I had no expectations. I don't even remember why I ended up seeing it in the theater, honestly, and ended up having a lot more fun at it than I ever would have guessed that I would have, and that was the most recent Mission Impossible film. Okay, yeah. Do you remember what the full title of that was? I can't even remember now.
Was that the one that was Fallout?
Yes, Mission Impossible Fallout. You're right. So, you know, I haven't seen a Mission Impossible film since Mission Impossible 2. Yeah. And didn't really know what to expect going in. And so just, again, you know, super low expectations. Yeah. And, you know, it's a lot of fun. You know, you can't think about anything, obviously, but the finesse that it was made with, the obvious just relish that the entire cast was having playing the particular characters they were playing. Yep. And then, of course, every scene with Tom Cruise and
the girl?
Henry Cavill.
Oh,
no,
Henry Cavill. Okay.
Any scene with the two of them going toe to toe was just a lot of fun. Like the level of absurd alpha male energy that they were throwing at each other in every scene. I mean, you just couldn't kind of help but kick back with a smile on your face and get a kick out of it. So my honorable mention definitely has to be Mission Impossible Fallout.
Yep, that was a good one as well. I'll just throw out also Deadpool 2 was a lot of fun.
Yes.
It wasn't quite the original, but that is another one where I had just a lot of laughs and enjoyed myself very much. So good choices. Yeah, I really enjoyed the Mission Impossible one as well. That was just too much fun. It kind of that's the way I feel like the James Bond movies want me to feel when I see them. Yeah. And I never do. But with Mission Impossible on that particular one, I definitely did.
You know, and kind of in the way I was saying that, you know, Into the Spider-Verse, you know, there's no brooding, there's no, you know, ultra heavy seriousness to that. You know, I feel like the James Bond movies, especially now, especially in their current Daniel Craig incarnation, they bring a lot of that to them. Like there's this kind of darkness, heaviness to all of them. And, you know, the Mission Impossible film, just there's none of that. Like it's all just eye candy and spectacle, and it's a lot of fun. Yeah.
All right, coming up, we're going to talk about one final trailer for the year. We've got one final trailer segment for you in 2018, and we are going to talk about Jordan Peele's new movie, his follow-up to Get Out, which is called Us. So this one is another horror trailer, a horror film, and obviously a lot of acclaim for Jordan Peele for Get Out, and this was pretty highly anticipated. And I have to say, I wasn't really into it until they sort of started to reveal the hook in the movie, which is actually very intriguing to me. The rest of it kind of seems like stock horror, but that hook is so different that I'm certainly intrigued to see it.
Yeah, based just on the surface of it, I mean, I'm not a huge horror fan, and like you say, there's a lot of horror tropes in it. So if this was coming from any other director, I would have zero interest in this movie at all. But you know, his take on his previous horror film was so interesting, and I sort of get the feeling that he's a guy who might feel it necessary to have an actual explanation for the weird stuff that happens in his horror films instead of it just being, oh, it was scary, so I did it. And that makes the hook that you're talking about a lot more intriguing, because I feel like it will be explained to me by the end of the film.
Right. Yeah.
Like, how is this possible?
Yeah, I'm curious about it. And also, it has Lupita Nyong'o. I'm hoping I'm saying that the right way. And I really like her. She's popping up in all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, she is very good.
Yeah, so I'm super excited to see where her career goes, and she's taking a lot of varied and interesting roles, and this looks like another one. So I'm I would say I'm mildly excited about that one. It just for me, the only thing that's keeping me being fully excited about it is, again, horror. I'm just not really huge into it.
Another thing that I really like in the trailer is that, once again, as he did with his previous film, he's having a very black centric take to it.
Sure.
And whereas Hollywood likes to do that, there's always sort of a, pandering element to it a little bit. And you don't get that from his films at all. It just seems like a natural outgrowth of the guy he is and the way he writes his scripts. And, obviously the plot he's trying to tell.
Right.
He always weaves that element into it. And you don't feel kind of squirmy when you see it. It's just a cool new angle on something. And I really enjoyed that in the previous film, and I really enjoy it in the trailer for the new one.
Yeah, I think he's got a very interesting singular voice, and I mean, obviously, this is going to be only his second direct film, so we have a long way to go there. But I just feel like I'm going to be interested to see where his career goes. He's going to continue to do sort of these smallish horror projects. Like, does he have designs on? He seems like the kind of guy to me that I would be real excited if they tossed him a Marvel movie, maybe.
Yeah, I could see that happening.
I feel like he's like the perfect level of director right now that they could toss one of those huge big budget comic book movies to him and see what happens.
Yes, but at the same time, he's now started his own production company, Monkey Paw Productions, and I mean, he's made it pretty clear that he's only interested in doing his own stuff.
Yeah, and that's fine. I respect that.
Yeah, so I'm actually far more excited about him getting a big budget to just make something wholly new and original.
Sure.
And I really, really hope that he gets the chance. And, it should be said this film won't come out till 2019, but 2018 has been a banner year for the horror genre.
For sure.
A lot of big successful films. One of the most successful franchises going right now is that Conjuring series. 2018 saw the release of its first spin-off film, which was The Nun, and that was more successful than any of the previous Conjuring films.
Yep.
It's just that genre has a lot of young talent going on in it, and they're making real popular movies. I know the horror genre gave you one of your favorite films of the year.
Sure.
So, I mean, it just...
Say it, Hereditary. Say the name.
Yes, Hereditary, yes. You really, really, really loved Hereditary.
You brought it up this time, not me.
I did. I didn't love it. But anyway, that genre doing really well. Jordan Peele is, I guess, kind of leading the charge at the moment right now in it. And so, hey, I'm looking forward to his new one.
Yeah, I feel like obviously the horror genre, as I think we've discussed before, the reason why it's so profitable is because you can make them on the cheap. People generally will go see them no matter what.
Yeah.
And I feel like now there's actually some quality starting to seep into that genre that wasn't, not that it wasn't there before, but you really had to look for it. Like I have friends who are big horror fans who have discerning tastes, and their favorite horror movies every year are either ones I haven't heard of at all, or they're ones that were just sort of low key, maybe even indie.
Right.
They're never the big release, ones. So I feel like some of those, it's becoming a little bit more mainstream to have some more talented directors working in that genre, which, again, not a big horror fan, but my favorite movie genre are good movies. Yeah. So whatever the genre is, rom-com, horror, whatever, I don't care. If it's good, then I want to see it.
Right. Well, looks like there's going to be one in 2019 for you.
Yep. All right. Well, we shall see what the year brings. We want to thank you guys for listening this year. You can always catch us on Twitter at TechBloodPod, and we'll be coming out with a new episode soon.
Yeah. Look forward to talking to you in 2019.